This will be then sent to the Indiana Small Business Development Center. So if you want to have a copy of this afterwards or something that you need to come back to, we also share it on our YouTube channel, which is at SBC First. And there's various other trainings that we do on there as well. So that's where that will be, or you can get a copy from the Indiana SBDC. All right, we're just going to jump right in. So my name is Christy Dudgeon. I am the president of SBC Consulting. We're actually based in Ohio. We are small business consultants that provide specialized training to various partners throughout the country. One of those happens to be the Indiana Small Business Development Center. So we assist with not only trainings like this, typically there's 1 to 2 a month that we're helping with, and generally they're in the evening time frame. You can sign any of them, as well as if you have a specialized need that maybe their advisors internally are not equipped to handle, they will then refer their clients directly to one of our consultants, right? And we help with that. So anything from learning QuickBooks to HR matters to SEO audits on websites and various other things that we assist with. Feel free to join me on LinkedIn, and you can follow some of the things that are happening there. We do post a lot of trainings and other items that we have going on throughout the country there as well. So what you can expect tonight is why does HR matter? You're here, so you probably know why matters, the legal aspects that you need to know with your first hire, federal and Indiana specific compliance that's out there, and also all of those links that I was talking about to help. So really the ending, I think it's like the last 10 or 15 slides are all just resource links that might be helpful for you as you navigate this. So HR matters, even if you have just one employee. A lot of the conversation I have with small businesses, they may they're just paying them as a 1099, which may or may not be accurate. We're going to go pretty deep into that because if I say one of the most common mistakes that I see right that one, right, we're not ready to jump into W-2 payroll or that type of thing, and maybe it's a cost reason, right? And so we accidentally misclassify someone and we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble with that. So why it matters, it protects your business, really. And you want to build your team the right way starting right now. So it encompasses a lot of different things when we talk about human resources. It's legal responsibility, tax responsibility, it's the cultures and expectations of your entire organization, and it can help protect your business. So it's not an afterthought kind of thing. It often gets lumped in, right, with one of those 7,000 hats that we all seem to be wearing as a small business owner. But these are all the things that can go wrong when we ignore HR, right? So some big words here: compliance, employment law, anti-discrimination, harassment prevention. It goes on and on and on. So we've got some IRS forms that we need to get familiar with. We're going to talk about a lot of those tonight, as well as how we can set those expectations for our employees and how we can maintain that consistency within our companies. In 2021, a small Indiana landscaping company hired a summer worker as a contractor. The IRS later ruled the person was an employee. The business had to pay back taxes, penalties, and interest over $8,500, all because they didn't understand classification rules. So that was one of those situations that I was talking where maybe we don't understand how to classify someone and we do it incorrectly, thinking that we might be doing it correctly. And in the end, it can cost us a lot of money. I'll use the example. I just had a conversation the other day with a business in Toledo, Ohio. And he said, well, this person wants to be paid as a 1099, and they're okay if they cover their own taxes. And still not okay. And we'll go through kind of that criteria, even if someone is asking you for it, or requesting it, it's not necessarily you still don't have the ability to make that decision based on what they're asking for. So this is just one example. Others include not reporting new hires when you've hired them. There's a certain time period in which you have to do that. Not withholding the correct taxes. This one could definitely get you in trouble. You know, there's employer side taxes that we have to be aware of for Social Security and Medicare. And then there is the employee side of both of those, as well as income tax withholdings that you need to have, and then also local municipal taxes that you're responsible for as a business to hold. Not having workers' compensation coverage or incorrectly classifying someone. I've had both sides of this as far as workers' comp is concerned. So there's different classification ratings based on what that person's job is. And obviously, the more dangerous that's which means you get to pay more in workers' comp for someone who has a more dangerous job. So we always talk about tree trimming and things like that. It's one of the highest ones, right? Because there's a lot of um, happen in something like that. And so they tend to have very high workers' comp rates for that type of business. However, we can sometimes be paying the wrong classification code for particular employees within our organization. And we just worked with a company in North Carolina on a financial aspect. It really didn't have anything to do with HR. And we were able to find they were misclassifying employees that had what should be a lower job classification, like an administrative rate. So they were paying over $11,000 more in workers' comp every year than they were supposed to be. I know a lot of us would like to have $11,000 back in our pocket as a business owner as opposed to paying that to workers' comp. So it does work both ways, right? Sometimes we're underclassifying, sometimes we're overclassifying, and really looking at each employee and what they do from a job aspect helps ensure that we've got the right workers' comp rating. I know in Ohio, we just went through the year true up. It's about this time of year where every fill out the document that says what were your wages for the entire year, how many employees worked in within each job classification, and what were those wages, right? And then it tallies what the actual workers' comp premium is then for that year. Accidentally violating anti-discrimination laws, including during the interview process. This one could be a little scary because sometimes we don't know what we can ask and what we can't ask, and what we can say and what we can say. And so that's why I say accidentally. We're not necessarily going out there and trying to violate anti-discrimination laws, but sometimes accidents do happen. Not completing paperwork correctly. There's a lot of forms that are involved in the HR world from a client standpoint, and being able to fill those out correctly is really important. Do from a employee file standpoint, and we'll go through a lot of those. We are maintaining those files in the way that we should. So in HR, one of the first steps that you can do as a small business before you've even hired your first employee is that we can build a foundation, and this can be as sophisticated as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be, but really that foundation is extremely important. And you can make it simple and practical. It doesn't have to be elaborate, right? So start with three basic processes within your business. And this is our employee files. What do they look like? How are they maintained? Where do we keep them? Right? That kind of thing. The employee handbook, again, can be very simple, can be extremely sophisticated. You will develop processes and updates to your employee handbook as you go along. There's certain things that you should have in it from a compliance standpoint that are basic things that you need to outline. They're pretty standard across small businesses, but then there's also more detailed things that are going to be very specific to your business. And maybe that's like your PTO policy or, maybe your for those to different classifications of employees. Maybe it's also your discipline policy, right? You might need to have that spelled out. You should have that spelled out. Um, do buy them, they're big and they're pretty and they're laminated. Every time one of the minimum wage laws change, the posters change, right? A lot of the federal employment laws don't really change that often, but it seems like the minimum wage one is the one that changes more often. Then you have to put a new poster, right? Because that has changed. But there are requirements on how you have to display these. They have to be prominent, they can't be hidden, that kind of thing, so that all employees are aware of their rights. So let's start with the employee file and what is required. So Lot of text here. I'm going to go over a lot of it, right? But I'm not going to read it word for word because you would be bored out of your minds. But you have to keep three separate employee files, and they're broken down here. And there's the reasons why you need to have three separate files. I remember when I was working with my first HR person that came into a company that I was working in, and each file had a different color, and I'm looking at it going, what are we doing? Like I'd never seen anything like that before. But these three files all have a purpose, right? So we've got the I-9 file. We're going to talk about I-9s a little bit more because this is one of those forms. And if you fill it out wrong and you get audited, it costs a lot of money when they fine you. This is a federal form. This is the one where you're verifying nine files together, separate. We've actually kept these in their own binder that is all the I-9s. There is rules around I-9s as far as how long you have to keep them after employees have terminated employment, whether you fired them or they've separated. This is something that you would file alphabetically, right? So that you could see everybody there. So it's the only thing in this binder is just I-9 forms, and it's for everyone. And then you have individual employee general files. This is for you as the employer. This is where you're going to keep different documents that are associated with payroll that's collected. If you want to keep their resume, if different reviews, things like that, you're going to put everything in there. If you have progressive discipline or something like basically any paperwork that has to do with the employee, you're going to put this in what's called the employee file. And this is the one that we're most generally used to, right? We have one file and we throw everything in there. You will throw everything in there except for the I-9 and then the third file that you have, and this is the one that most people make red, is the employee medical file. And because of HIPAA laws and things of that nature, you do want to keep those separate from the employee general files. So this is doctor's notes, disability information, anything to do with medical. You must protect and secure those files from others. So you might have a general file and then you might have these locked up in a different spot. And so you want to keep those separate. Not that you're going to have your employee general files out in the open for everybody to view as well, but there might be different access levels depending on the type of company that you have, right? So the next thing outside of these employee files then to talk about is the employee handbook. And so these are some simple policies that you're going to want to have in your handbook. And there's a basic template link at the bottom. Again, it's in the slides that I sent you. This is from Indeed. If you guys have ever looked for a job or posted a job, you probably have worked or found your way to Indeed, right? There's also a lot of other resources for a basic handbook. You could even ask ChatGPT nowadays, right? To create a basic handbook. But this is a must for every company because one, you want to make sure that from a protecting yourself standpoint as an employer, you've at least given everybody the information, right? They haven't necessarily understood it, but step one is to make everyone aware that you're at will employment, right? Or what the state's rules are around employment, right? They're not a contract employee; they're at will. Anti-discrimination policies, these are pretty standard type policies, anti-harassment, safety and security. You may have very specific safety and security if you've got electronic data that people are dealing with. Maybe they've got a computer that you've provided or a phone that you've provided. So there's different safety and security policies that you want to put in there. Any kind of compensation and benefits, work schedules, vacation leave would be in there, standards of conduct, and then general employment information. So in the templates, you'll see those standard, anti-harassment, anti-discrimination type policies, and then you can plug in that other information. And as I mentioned before, this is something that you will build over time. Now, if any of you already have a business and you already have employees and you haven't rolled out an employee handbook to anyone, generally there's a process to do that you should consider following. And so it's you've created the handbook, right? And then most companies will just have a general meeting with all of their employees. And maybe you do this in 1 to 2 meetings or whatever, depending on how your business operates, right? I can speak to this from a landscape company standpoint that I used to work in. We had we had morning crews and we had afternoon crews that came in, and it was depending on what their jobs were. So we did this twice, right? So we had the whole morning crew that came in, and then we sat everybody down and we said, we have a new handbook and we're handing it all to you. And we went through it and reviewed it, everyone. And you have a piece of paper that everyone signs off and just says, I've received it. That's typically the step. And so when you hire a new employee, if you've ever been hired by a company, generally that's the process, right? You get a copy of the handbook, and part of that process for onboarding is that you sign that little piece of paper that says that you are that you've received a copy of the handbook. Then, so that's it for handbooks for the moment. So required posters. This was that third part. So what and where. Required notice posters, you have to have these even if you have one employee. You must display them. There will be a federal one and one for Indiana labor law. And they are both physical, as I mentioned before. You can buy them on Amazon or something like that, or digital. You can share this digitally if you have an entire remote team, right? So there's no standard place you can post these things, and you can download them for free. But as I mentioned before, you can't really print them off big and prominent. So it's up to you. Or you just where you can actually download them from that site. And there are everything is spelled out on it as far as where it's required. You'll see the break room or maybe where the time clock is, or just depending on how your setup is, but it has to be in a prominent place where employees would likely, be near. That's why it ends up in a break room or something like that, so that you're not hiding it behind a door or things like that. So let's talk about classifying employees. We are going to spend a little bit of time on this because there is some very specific criteria to follow. And then there's always a gray area that you will stump some people, like, is it this or is it that? And so if you ever find yourself in I'm not real sure if it could be this, always err on the side they're probably an employee if you're asking yourself that, as opposed to saying, well, they could be a contractor, because you'll get in less trouble if you have people classified as an employee versus a contractor. And I use this as an example of the manufacturing company I was talking to recently. They have someone that comes in on their own. This might make a little more sense if you've not gone through this once I get through these slides, but they come in on their own time, so they don't have a specific schedule. However, they work within the equipment that the factory has, and they do a specific job, but they do it on their own, right? And so that one's a little bit of a gray area, and you'll see why that criteria makes it gray. And it's like, probably we should err on the side that they're an employee as opposed to a contractor. They do turn in their hours if they worked, right? And so they get paid hourly. So classification is your responsibility. It's 100% on you. It's not driven by the employee. It is one of those things that's your responsibility to determine it correctly. Generally, you cannot simply pay an employee as a 1099 just because they requested it. I mentioned that before. You will get that a lot. The determination of whether a worker is an employee or independent contractor is based on very specific criteria. So misclassification can cost you. If you did misclassify someone, even if you did the best effort that you could, you will still owe back taxes for however long that employee worked for you. There are interest and penalties that will be involved with that, as well as possibly unpaid overtime and benefits. So this is sometimes a reason that a lot of people will try to not pay people as an employee, is because they're trying not to pay them overtime. Well, if ultimately in the end it's determined that with an employee, then you will be responsible for that unpaid overtime as well. So it's not a fun game to play, right? Employee or contractor. So this is how the IRS decides. They look at three different criteria, and it's behavioral, financial, and the type of relationship. And so this is directly from the IRS right here. And these are the questions that you will ask yourself. does the company control or have the right to control what the worker does and how the worker does their job? So basically, you're telling them when they have to work and you're telling them what to do when they do so, right? So they have zero independence, really, or limited independence in how they function. Definitely, if they have a set schedule that's determined by you, they're an employee, not a contractor. So financial are the business aspects of the worker's job controlled by the payer. So these include things like how the worker is being paid, whether expenses are reimbursed, and who provides the tools and supplies. That who provides the tools and supplies is the one that the manufacturing company was kind of stepping into a different world, right? Because it's their equipment, it's their factory, they're doing this job, they're working on their line. That definitely sounds like it's stepping into the world of the employee. The only thing that might have stepped into contractor is nobody told that person when they had to come in and nobody told them what they had to do when they got there. However, they had been trained on what to do at some point in that job. And then the type of relationship. Are there written contracts or employee type benefits? So is there a pension plan, insurance, vacation plan, etc.? Will the relationship continue and is the work performed a key aspect of the business? So is this an ongoing thing until you say we're done with you, or is there a defined start and stop day or start and stop time, I guess? Also, don't guess, get it right. Said that a few times. Misclassification could definitely cost you. This is the link on this slide to the IRS so that you can see the criteria that I spelled out in the previous slide. They do say it in the IRS documents on the website the same thing a couple different ways. So depending on how you need to move through it and understand, this is an easy way, I guess, easier way for me to break it down to kind of understand the difference between them. So the employee is on the left here. So W-2 means you set the schedule, you provide the tools, taxes are being withheld, eligible for unemployment, workers' comp is required. So those top two are kind of in that classification world. And then the bottom three is, a W-2 we're withholding those is for sure. They're obviously going to be eligible for unemployment because they are part of payroll. Obviously, we have to have workers' comp as well, because that all comes along with being a W-2 employee. On the right, a contract 99, they control their own schedule, they use tools. So they're two pretty simple classifications. Even though they could be operating under their own social security number, they typically will have their own EIN number or their own company, and they will have to cover themselves from a workers' comp standpoint. They'll probably have insurance on their own as well. So these are important questions to ask, cover yourself. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into what does it mean to be a W-2 employee. So W-2 employers withhold taxes. We are required as W-2 employers to withhold federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare taxes from the W-2 employee wages and pay them to the government. So we withhold that from everybody's check and we pay it to the government on their timeline. At the end of the year, we have to provide a W-2 form to each employee detailing the wages that are paid and those taxes that were withheld. So that's why we call them W-2 employees, because they get that at the end of the year. Employee tax filing. So the employees use that information on the W-2 form to file their personal returns. Different benefits and protections that W-2 employees have is that W-2 employees are often eligible for benefits like health insurance, paid time off, retirement plans that might be offered by the employer. Now, you're not required, right, to offer most of these as far as health insurance and extra things that have been added in there as far as federal laws. You have to be a certain size, different things from a uh, Family Medical and Leave Act, those you have to be a certain number of employees, right? I think it's 50 in order to fall under the federal Family Medical and Leave Act. I don't know why I can't remember that one off the top of my head. I keep wanting to say FMLA, but I know you might not be familiar with it, so I wanted to say the whole word. But it's important to know based on the size of the company that you are, what you are required to offer or to provide. And there is no leeway with that, right? It's you have this number of employees, therefore you have to provide it, and you start to fall under that. But there aren't necessarily rules on or underpaid time off and retirement plans and things like that out there. Legal protections, they're covered by U.S. labor laws as a W-2, and that provides protections like minimum wage, as well as overtime pay, and then workplace safety as well. Then we have unemployment. So employees who use their job through no fault of their own may be eligible for unemployment benefits. You are required based on the wages that you pay, the employees that you have, to pay unemployment insurance. This is not something that you're withholding from the employee. This is specifically for the employer that they have to pay. And so then if employees do lose their job at no fault of their own, you go through an entire process, whether they receive unemployment or not, and it comes out of the unemployment fund for that, which is what every employer is paying into. And then workers' comp. So, workers' comp covers an employee who are injured or become ill due to their job, providing lost wage and medical expenses. Then the worker relationship, the employer has control. Employers have the right to control or direct the work of a W-2 employee, including setting the hours that they work and the tasks they perform. Workplace and equipment, employers are generally responsible for providing all of the necessary workspace, equipment, and tools as well for that employee to do the job. The difference with a 1099 employee is these are independent contractors, and that name is there for a reason. Um, no direct supervision. So the hiring entity cannot direct the work of a 1099 contractor for it to fall within the IRS classifications. Benefits are not provided. The form 1099 NEC is the form that if you are paying an independent contractor $600 or more in the year for business services, the hiring entity, so you as the employer, must file the form 1099 NEC and provide a copy to the contractor by January 31st of the following year. So anybody that is an independent contractor that works more than $600, that you've paid them more than $600 throughout the year, you have to give them then that 1099. And when you do that 1099, you're actually sending it to the IRS as well as giving a copy to that independent contractor. But as long as they're under $600, you do not have to do that. Businesses should obtain a Form W-9. So this is the IRS form that you will need to have every independent contractor fill out. This is sometimes a step that gets missed or forgotten. You just start paying the independent contractor. The question I often also get is, how do I know if I'm supposed to give somebody a 1099? The ones that are probably the more obvious are yes, I have like a subcontractor that's working for me, that's performing some kind of work for a project that I'm on, that kind of thing. Those independent contractors seem to be pretty clear, and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to give them a 1099. There are other professionals that fall under what would be considered an independent contractor. You give them a 1099. Definitely not anybody that's a corporation or an S corp, that kind of thing. But more in the professional services type world. So a lot of these, their accountant will end up dealing with it anyway in the end. So the W-9 form, though, the reason I say this is kind of a step that sometimes gets forgotten. The W-9 form has all of the information that you need in order to be able to file the 1099 with the IRS. So it's basic information such as the name. It might be a business name or it might be their personal name, right? It might be their social security number or it's an EIN number, which is their IRS filing number. It's got their address because mail used to be a thing, right? Typically, 1099s are all done electronically now, so you're not necessarily mailing them, but sometimes somebody will want the physical copy of it, so you're mailing it. And That's pretty much the basic information that you're going to get off of the W-9. The reason I say this is an important step for you to do in the front end is during the normal course of business throughout the year, you might have a lot of 1099 or independent contractors that come and go as part of your normal business. And it's not a fun thing. I've seen a lot of businesses do it when you're trying to prepare your 1099s the following year to then go back and ask for that information, right? So if you have a process, a lot of companies will have what's called like a subcontractor packet, right? That you're asking for, where you might have a standard contract agreement, a certificate of insurance requirement, and then you'll have a W-9 that they'll fill out as well. And then that way you've got all that information on the front end before you've ever paid them that first payment to make sure that you're then able to do it. And if you don't pay them $600, you don't pay them $600, right? And you don't have to worry about it, but at least you've got the information on the front end, so you're protecting yourself. Payment should be completed for work as agreed upon in the contract if they're a 1099. So, question for you guys. And I wish the chat was working, but you can go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'll just see your answer, right? But if it's a contractor or employee, so you guys are going to answer what you is the right one here. I hire my neighbor's kid to clean the store every Monday and Wednesday at 5 p.m. using my supplies. Is that a contractor or is it an employee? I'll give you a second to answer. Thank you, Rachel. See if anybody else is awake. All right, so this is an employee, not a contractor, per the classification. So good job on that. Next one, I pay a graphic designer to create a logo. She works from her own studio, uses her own software, and charges a flat fee. Is this a contractor or is this an employee? Yes, nice job. This is a contractor. All right, so what we must do before we hire someone. So first, before the employee's first day, your business must be registered properly. So these are the steps we have to take. Hopefully, if you're in business, you've done this, but right, some of us operate as a business without doing this. But these are the kind of these steps that we have to take before we can be ready to do payroll. So we need an EIN number. This is an IRS thing. So irs.gov is where we're going to go for that. We need to register for Indiana withholding. These links I have later instead of right now. Whitney, you figured out the chat. That's awesome. You need to register for unemployment insurance and secure workers' comp insurance. And then you can also set up E-Verify if you choose to do so. You are not required to do E-Verify yet. It's been going back and forth for many years. Definitely when I was in the landscaping world years ago, it was a hot topic because E-Verify is confirming that someone is legally permitted to work within the United States. But it is still optional. It's not a required thing. So there are some companies that, because there are some contracts that require a particular company to do it. But most of us in our general course of business, day-to-day world are not required to e-verify. So skipping these steps can result in penalties before you even run your first payroll. And obviously to set up your first payroll, regardless of what system you're using, if you partner with a payroll company, they're probably going to help you through these steps, right? If you're trying to do payroll on your own, you're going to have to end up putting in this information in order to run your first payroll. So this is the basic steps that you have to take in order to be able to do that. So what's an EIN number? I've said this a few times now. It's your federal tax ID number, like a social security number, but it's for your company. It's required to report your payroll taxes, to file Form 941. Form 941, if you've not been familiar with that, that actually is pertaining to your payroll taxes. You will file that quarterly, typically, issuing W-2s or 1099s. So regardless of which one, however you've classified someone, you need your EIN number in order to send those to the IRS, and then also to open those payroll accounts. You also need an EIN number to open a business checking account, that's completely classified as business. So most businesses already have one. It's free to obtain. Please, please, please do not pay someone to do this for you. There are so many scams out there, and I should have mentioned this before. So that's also why I put all of the links in here that I did, because any federal form, it seems like, or any federal thing that you're looking for, someone is trying to scam you out there. And so you might start to fill out some kind of information, and then suddenly you get to the part where they're charging you. I actually had that not that long ago with a passport. It was someone who wanted to charge me double the fee to file it on my behalf when it's something that's free for you to do, right? It's a pain, but it's free. So make sure you're in the .govs for all of these and not a .org or something like that, because that's probably a scam and they're going to try to charge you a fee in order to do that. That and you might have just supplied them with a lot of information about your business. So protect yourself, be careful. The Indiana DOR, so this is the state income tax withholding. If you have employees, you have to withhold Indiana income tax. You remit the payments to the state and you file withholding returns there. Even part-time employees, right? So even if they work an hour or they work 50, they work for one day, or they're there for 365, you're still required to do that. So the link there is at the bottom. Notice the .gov. That's how you find it. And then registration for Indiana unemployment insurance. It's always called SUTA. So state unemployment tax. You're also going to see FUTA. That's Federal Unemployment Tax Association or Administration Association, one of those. Employers must pay into the unemployment system. I mentioned that before, and report those wages quarterly. If an employee is laid off, this is where the benefits are coming from. So if you have a company that does regular layoffs or unexpected layoffs, this is how they get paid. So link there at the bottom. And then workers' comp. This is insurance company or coverage for work-related injuries or illness. I don't know about you, but every time I make a doctor's appointment, they automatically ask, is this for something that happened at work, or what is it? That's because of workers' comp. Most Indiana employers with one or more employees are required to carry coverage. This protects the employee. It also protects your business from large liability claims. Coverage is obtained through a private insurance carrier, and you can get more information about it at the link there at the bottom. Each state runs their workers' comp just a little bit different. And then e-verifying, as I mentioned before, it's optional for most businesses. It's a federal system that confirms if the employees are authorized to work in the United States. So if you're a government contractor, though, they typically do require it, or you work with certain private or public funding, I mean. It's optional for most private small businesses, but it can add an extra compliance layer. And then so it's everify.gov is the link for that. And this is a checklist before you hire. So confirm you have an EIN, you've got your DOR registration, your DW is registered, and your workers' comp is secured. And so once these are completed, you're ready to hire legally and confidently, at least from this standpoint, right? Required new hire then. So we've got back list done, and now we're ready to onboard. One is the word that I like to say. We're ready to hire someone. So, what paperwork must be completed when we hire someone? I mentioned before the I-9 form. The form is confirming that they are legally permitted to work within the United States. Then we have a W-4 form and a WH-4. These are withholdings for income tax. One of them is going to be for federal, one of them is going to be for the state. And then you've got an Indiana new hire reporting. So you have to report to the state of Indiana that you hired someone. There's certain information on that form that you have to fill out. Most of this, these are paper forms, right? The I-9, you're not actually turning into the IRS. The W-4, you're not turning in. You're using a number off of those to determine what the payroll withholdings are. But the Indiana new hire reporting, it's should be electronic. going in and you're actually saying this is the person that I hired. And there's more information that we'll go to on that. But the I-9 form, as I mentioned before, this one can be a little scary. But this verifies the person is legally eligible to work in the US. It has to be completed within 3 business days of their start day. I recommend on their very first day or prior to their very first day, you make sure that you have this completed. You are required to physically inspect their ID documents. There are certain groups. There's a option A, option B, option C. They're all listed on the back of the I-9. But these are documents like a passport. Passports rule. Typically, if they have a passport, you don't need additional documents to verify. If they're using a driver's license, they also would then need to show a social security card, green card, things like that. There's other options in there, but the passport rules one document, then you get to where you've got to have 2 documents, depending on what the other things are. They have to keep this form on file for 3 years or 1 year after termination. So obviously you're just going to keep it for a while, and then you're going to get rid of it 1 year after termination. So whichever is later, right? You do not send this form to the government, but it is available in case of an audit. So this is that one that I said you're going to keep it in its own folder, its own binder, depending on however many employees you have. I keep saying binder because it's just easier to flip through them when you're verifying if they're correct, or if you do have someone who's like a human resources consultant or something that comes in and looks at it to verify if things are correct. You can get a PDF copy of the I-9 here at that link at the bottom, as well as info and instructions. And the reason I say that this one could be a little scary is that you want to make sure that you fill this out correctly. And so following those instructions, or really knowing which sections I'm required to fill out. Often I see people fill out more than they're supposed to, which is ironic, but there's a section, if you're assisting someone in filling it out, then that would be filled out right. So you can assist someone. Obviously, that is, someone who might not necessarily speak the language on the form, or is visually impaired, or something of that nature. They're probably going to have someone who's assisting you fill that out, and they will put their information on there. It does have to be signed. I have had employees that cannot read or write, and so but the signature is extremely important, and it has to be on there. And sometimes it is an X is all that they know how to do, right? But at least witness that you've made that effort. The part about physically inspecting the documents, this is where I've seen a lot of people potentially get in trouble, because we are not the judge and jury here, right? We are doing the best that we can with the documents that we have provided to us. The government at this point does not require us to know everything there is about social security cards and that. And you might have employees that you're not familiar with their documents, and really we can only do what we can do. That's where e-verification comes into play. That's an extra level of compliance. Those documents, so they might make a copy of their driver's license and their social security as standard process. Now, that's okay if that's part of your standard process and you're using it to fill out that I-9 form. However, I have been told by numerous HR people, do not keep those copies then, and do not keep them in the binder with the I-9 forms. So all you're legally required to do is to inspect them and then enter them on the document. However, fraudulent or they're incorrect or something like that, you could that because you kept a copy of it. So just protect yourself and not keeping it. You may keep it in the employee general file. Also, it could be dangerous to have somebody's social security card just out there floating around from a security standpoint, but it's up to you what you want to do from that standpoint. But my advice, keep those documents or copies of those documents with the I-9 forms. So the only thing that should be with the I-9s, that way if you get audited, you're just handing them I-9s and nothing else. You don't send it to the government, right? But it has to be available. So let's go to the next thing. I don't know why I went backwards. W-4, federal tax withholding. This tells you how much federal income tax to withhold from their pay. They'll fill it out and sign it. You keep it in their file. So this is one of those things you're going to drop in the general file. The PDF form here that you can get, and then about the form. 9 times out of 10, it's crazy. I would get asked questions. How should I fill this out? Or what should I put in this? Do not advise, right? As much as possible. There unfortunately is this really huge, long, instructions that I feel like nobody understands, and this calculation that you go through. But just don't overstep and advise them. Usually you'll just have to say, I can't provide you with that guidance. Just put in there what you feel is the best, or talk to your family, or whatever you need to do to fill that out. And then the WH-4 is the Indiana withholding then. So this is very similar to the W-4, which is the federal form, but this is for the Indiana state income taxes. It's required even for private, as I mentioned. Definitely the federal form is required whether you're full-time or part-time. And you can get a copy of that form here. That's the official Indiana WH-4 download form. Indiana does not submit this form to DOR, so it stays with the employer for payroll records. So the reason I put that note there is you put it into the general file. When you are setting up payroll, one of the things that payroll, as you are going through your employee setup, it'll ask, what is your state withholding? And you put a number there, like 0, 1, 2, if they have additional amount withholding, you would put that in there as well. So you can make sure that the system then is withholding the correct amount of taxes from them. Then we have the Indiana new hire form. You must report your new hire to the Indiana Department of Workforce Development within 20 days. That's an exceptionally long amount of time. And if you have a lot of employees that you're bringing in all at the same time, then, it might take you 20 days. If you are having everybody fill out that paperwork the day that they're starting or right before they're starting, then I would just make it part of my normal process to turn around and put these things in their file, set up their payroll, do my new hire reporting so that way I don't forget to send it there. So this is to track child support and other enforcement requirements. So if somebody is supposed to have their wages garnished, this is the trigger, right, to the state that the person has a job that they're being paid. It's a very online form. There's the thing. I thought it was an online form. This is the official the employee fill it out, and then you'll go online and type the information in. Reporting is required if you hire employees in Indiana. By law, you are required to report within that 20-day time frame. So if someone is supposed to have garnished, what will then happen is you will receive a notification from whatever entity that may be. So it's not necessarily going to come from the state of Indiana. It could be coming from another state. Whoever has made that requirement, you do have to comply with that. And so it's another step that will force you into that. Nate, I see your thing. Hopefully you're able to get back in. So you'll just jump in that same link to come right back in that you used before. And I'll let you back in. So Nate's having computer problems, everyone. All right. So next step with new hire. Hopefully that all made sense. Those wage garnishment forms, though, they're kind of a pain because it is an extra step in payroll, right? But you will know that they exist, and it'll tell you exactly how much you would have to withhold and where that you would then send that payment to when you withhold it. That isn't something that the employer pays for, right? That's the employee. So payroll 101, what you're now responsible for. Yay. So you are responsible for withholding federal, state, and then paying employer taxes and filing I talked about. So federal withholding based on your employee's W-4, we talked about that a little bit previously. FICA is what the Social Security and Medicare. So it's split 50-50. So this is the half of it will pay and then the other half. So that's not withheld. And then the state of Indiana, based on that WH-4, form, you must withhold state income tax. You are withholding that from the employee. That's not what the employer pays, and you remit it to the Department of Revenue. You'll file this monthly or quarterly. It all depends on your payroll volume. So when you set up your withholding with the state, when you file these forms, they're going to ask you what your expected payroll is, and that's how you're going to determine then whether you file quarterly or you file monthly. And then employer payroll taxes, in addition to FICA, you're also responsible for FUTA. Remember, I said that before. Federal Employment Tax Act. This is paid by the employer only. This is much lower than what SUTA is, as the state unemployment taxes. Taxes. That's the Indiana unemployment tax, and that is employer paid as well. And then Form 941, this is your quarterly tax return. Every quarter, you have to file this with the IRS. And this form tells the IRS how much you withheld and you paid. It's due at the end of the month following each quarter. If you do not file this form on time, you do pay penalties. It's not fun. The IRS doesn't like it. So, how to handle this? How do we handle payroll? Manual tracking and submitting payments and filings. Not fun. However, it's possible to do it. So, all of these entities that you have signed up with have the ability then to go in and pay them all individually, depending on whatever their payment schedule is. So, if you want to take the time, you want to have that control in order to do that, absolutely you can do it. So, that's manually tracking and submitting. You can use payroll software or services like Gusto, QuickBooks. You can use ADP, those bigger companies, which handle calculations and filings automatically. So, a lot of payroll services, especially the electronic ones, they'll do the payroll for. They pull the withholdings right then. They may hold them and file them at a different or pay them at a different time. I've had a lot of small businesses complain about some of the payroll companies and kind of their practices. I'm not going to say I don't disagree with some of those arguments, because these larger payroll companies sometimes, and what I mean by that is you may only have to pay things quarterly depending on who it is you're paying it to. And so what they're doing is they're withdrawing the money from your checking have to spend, and then, get hit with it later. However, I could see the point of some small businesses. They would rather take that money, put it into a savings account, right, draw interest from themselves, as opposed to it sitting in some big payroll company's bank account where they're drawing interest off your money. But that's typically how it rolls, right? They will withdraw the payment that is going to the employees. They'll withdraw the taxes from your account, and then they'll charge you a fee. So you'll usually see three things it hit your bank account at the exact same time when payroll is run. And there's different settings that you can have with different payroll companies too. So sometimes there's automatic payments to the IRS and things like that are part of it. Sometimes you can shut those off. It depends on the level of the help that you want. Just know, if you want to walk away from it or be a set it and forget it kind of company, then you want to not have the responsibility of paying those on your own then, or the headache, right? If you accidentally don't pay it on time. And there's also third parties out there all the time, right? So different accountants, things like that, will do that on your behalf as well. And so everybody's pay is different, as far as what they charge, and just do some shopping around, right, and find the one that fits your need. So here's some different platforms, as I mentioned before. Depending on what they can do, these are some of the more popular, more. So all of the payroll processing, all of though, not all of them do that. It's not an automated process, so you may have to do that. Not all of them will pay all the taxes on your behalf either. I know with QuickBooks in general, you people, because I teach QuickBooks. So, municipal taxes, you still have to potentially go and file and pay municipal taxes. There's wage garnishments types things that I was talking about before. They don't it won't necessarily be part of the automated process. So just pay attention when you are in QuickBooks Payroll or one of those that when they are sending you those things saying that you have an upcoming tax payment due, it's probably because you are supposed to be paying that on your own. I had one client in general, she was hysterical. She didn't realize she was supposed to be paying her own city taxes for where she was located, and she got hit with interest and fees that was more than what she actually had to pay originally, which was ridiculous. It was just a mistake on her part, but guess what? They were not forgiving about it because they go with the whole you should know it, right? So asking them to forgive interest is not a fun thing. HR tools, a lot of these have basic HR tools. So some of those things that I was talking about, you can see with Gusto, ADP Run, Paychex Flex, there's different HR services that are available. If you have QuickBooks, if you have the higher tier plans, there's an entire HR platform. You can build an employee handbook in seconds. You can have access to different benefits information and different benefits tiers. Same thing with Gusto. So some of these have that extra layer of help that you may need as a small business. And then there's kind of what they're best for, right? Gusto and QuickBooks are probably two of them that I hear the most about. Typically, how these are priced out have a monthly fee, and then they have a per employee fee. So there is a point where one may make more sense than the other, right? And that's usually based on what that monthly fee is. Maybe it's got a low monthly fee, but it's got a high per employee fee. And that might make sense if you only have a few employees. However, if you start to get more and more employees, the one with the higher monthly fee and the lower per employee, they it kind of tips the scale, right? So from a pricing standpoint, that's one thing you want to pay attention to. HR policies that you need to have. This is just a checklist. These are in those slides that I shared with you. So every new employer has to have these policies. This is an at employment statement, equal opportunity employment, anti-harassment, anti-retaliation, and then a complaint reporting procedure too. So what happens, like how does someone go to someone if someone is violating these policies, right? Is it the president in the company? Is it the HR manager? If you don't have these people, right? Is it the owner? Is it someone else, the office manager? You just have to um, be able to say what's the process? Is it a form they fill out, right? In order to complain about it, so that their complaints can be investigated then and heard. Um, Pay and time policies, so work hours and scheduling, timekeeping and overtime, paydays and payroll practices, paid time off, sick it, right? These are important things that you should have policies around. Code of conduct, attendance and tardiness. Oh my gosh, I don't know that how many times I've been asked that. Employees don't show up or they're always late. Like, what do I do? And then first of all, it's like, well, do you have a policy around it? So first thing you have to do is create the policy. Then you can do what the HR world likes to call progressive discipline, right? So what's the path to um, saying you need to, you violated this policy 3 times. It's a lot easier to have these conversations with employees when you can say the exact policy that was violated, right? As opposed to just being like, well, you're late for work all the time. Instead, if you actually are writing someone up or doing one of these things, or it's a performance review or someone's, it's that annual raise time or whatever it may be, you're at least able to go back to the employee handbook and say, you've been late 3 times. Here's our policy on tardiness, and so now we have to take this action or whatever that may be, right? It becomes a lot easier conversation for anyone to be able to just lean back to that. And it also helps ensure that you're being consistent with all of your employees, and so nobody's gonna say that you're showing favoritism or something like that. Um, Employment structure, so classifications, employee versus contractor. If you have both, right, you want to put that in there. If you have introductory or probationary periods, if you use those, so somebody's got a 90-day probation or whatever. Discipline and termination policy. So that's what I was with that discipline policy. What does that look like, right? Or the termination policy. Now, Indiana being an at-will state, right? So you can hire and fire at will, is basically what that means. You don't even have to have progressive have your ducks in a row, right? Have your paperwork there, document things. That's what HR is all about. Other than paying people, it's also documenting and making sure compliance is followed. Administrative and protection, confidentiality, personnel file policy, right? So we keep these general files. Technically, employees can request to see those files at any time. So make sure that the files that we're retaining are ones that we don't mind them seeing. And they're able to access them and review them. Often you'll get that request when maybe there's a bad performance review or they feel like a termination is coming or they're trying to get their own documentation in place. That they'll want to see their employee file. And right, if you've never had a disciplinary action before, and then suddenly they get this awful performance review, they'd be like, wait a minute, this is the first time I'm ever hearing about it, right? I want to review my employee file. They're confirming whether something's in there or not. Technology and social media use policy, and then employee acknowledgement page. That employee acknowledgement page, I mentioned that before, is saying, hey, I got this. Not, hey, I've read it, hey, I've understand it. That's a little bit on the employee. But this can be as simple as 5 to 10 pages covering those basics to protect your business, right? And you can start with those general ones. And as I mentioned before, you'll develop more and more over time, especially often as you get tested as an employer is when you start to create policies around it. So the employees will sometimes guide the things that you outline what bonuses and raises and all the fun things too, right? That might exist. So it's not all about policies and negative things. It's also culture. So remember, HR is a big part of that. Unfortunately, we're just not talking about much today and what that means from an HR standpoint. It's more in compliance that we're talking about. So using ChatGPT and templates responsibly, I do want to mention this. The policy prompts and examples provided, so I'm going to give you some of those, are for training and general guidance, right? Not legal advice. Do not replace these as a consultation with an attorney or someone of that nature. Employment laws change all the time, and they may apply differently. And uh, AI is not always right. It will be so confident, the most confident thing ever, until you call it out and it goes, oh, yeah, you're right. Oops. So sorry that I told you that wrong thing. It's so annoying. However, just make sure that you are protecting yourself. Don't put employee information in there. Most most AI, unless you are in the higher tiered pay versions, they use that information to train their models. So you don't want to put any kind of personal information in there. But as far as the laws change, definitely err on looking at the actual state or federal laws. But ChatGPT is great to get information right and to get started as far as helping you draft a lot of these policies. But make sure that you are ensuring the compliance with them once ChatGPT gives them to you. The at will statement. So what it covers, it clarifies that employment is at will. They can be terminated anytime by either party for lawful reasons, right? So don't do anything shady. It prevents claims of guaranteed employment. So that is just ensuring that anybody is free at any time and you are free to let them go. And so it helps reduce that wrongful termination. Someone doesn't have that expectation. So the chat GPT prompt that you can use down there at the bottom is in those slides that I gave you as well, right? So we can copy paste that into chat GPT or type it in there and it will give us a clear at will. I would also recommend in any of these, well, I already have the business located in Indiana. I want to make sure it's at Indiana. I would always reference the particular state that you're in. Equal opportunity employment. So commitment to non-discrimination under federal and Indiana civil rights laws. It protects against discrimination claims and establishes workplace standards. So this is a chat GPT prompt you can use for that to help you draft that. Anti-harassment and complete. So this prohibits harassment and explains how employees report those concerns. I've had a lot of claims of harassment within a workplace, right? And so it is very important that you have that path to the complaint procedure and that you take those complaints seriously, and you investigate them. You document them. So, depending on how you handle them as an employer, sometimes this is where you might want to uh, utilize an HR consultant if you don't have an actual HR person, or maybe your payroll company offers you that extra HR support. In order to work through those. But usually, where employers get into trouble is that they don't investigate them or they don't follow through with an actual complaint. And so that can be pretty serious when someone says, I complained about it and my employer did nothing about it, right? Generally, what it will be is a training to entire company on anti-harassment, is so that you are covering the base of making sure that everyone's aware that you have whatever policy in place. It's one of the most legally critical policies in your handbook. So that's the chat GPT prompt you can use. Work hours, timekeeping, and overtime. So may or may not be part of it, right? And so this is going to be very much dependent on your work schedules, how you track time, if you have hourly employees or if they're salary employees, and they're an expectation of what type of schedule they keep, right? Or the hours that they work, and then any overtime rules that you have there as well. We're not really going into wage and labor issues, right? And so overtime, you want to make sure if it's an employee that is you should be paying overtime to, that you are paying overtime to, and which covers a lot of them, right? Even some salary employees now at this point. It's been a heavily debated topic as far as who is subject to overtime and who isn't. Why that matters, wage and hour violations, one of the most common in small business. So employers, unfortunately, there are some really bad ones out there, and I hate to say that. I hope that all of you are not bad ones. But there are a lot of employers out there that are trying to figure out ways not to pay people. And so they come up with really creative ways of, I've suspended this employee, and but I've told them they had to work while they were on their suspension, like as a discipline thing. So basically, if anybody's doing any kind of work, you have to pay them. Even if you think that they're doing it slow or wrong or whatever that may be, they're still working on your behalf and you have to pay them. So this is a chat GPT prompt in which you can utilize for that. So write a timekeeping and overtime policy for a small Indiana business, right? What reference those federal wage and labor laws, clarify overtime requirements for non-exempt, and include expectations for accurate time reporting. And so that accurate time reporting, as I mentioned, you're probably going to want to add a little bit to this prompt to be however it is that you're maintaining time, right? Is it electronic? Is it a paper time clock still? Or are they filling out a form? I don't know. That's specific to you, how you keep track of that. And then payrolls and paydays. So, what is your pay schedule? How does someone ask for a payroll correction? This is a big one, right? So, in the world, when I talk about my lovely landscaping people, there is a set way that you can do things to try to prevent payroll errors, right? So inevitably, when you have a bunch of hourly employees and they're using an electronic time clock, you probably should have them sign off on their time card that they approve it, that it's accurate, before you actually run payroll, right? Because the last thing you want to do is to run payroll, then it's somebody say, you didn't pay me the right amount or you didn't pay me the right number of hours, and then you've got to run it again. There's usually a cost involved with that. So knowing what the pay schedule is, so how often do you pay, as well as what does somebody do with payroll corrections, how are those handled, and then what deductions that you're obviously withholding or that you're required to withhold. So you're setting clear expectations. This helps reduce those payroll disputes, and so you're telling ChatGPT to create this whole payroll process right for you. Attendance and conduct, professional behavior, attendance expectations, workplace standards, provides documentation support for these disciplined decisions. So, as I mentioned that before, you should have some kind of policy that talks about what discipline is. And then, if you have the policy, make sure that you apply that to everyone across the board, and it's just a standardized, consistent thing. Because if you're doing discipline or following whatever this policy with one employee and not another, everybody sees that, everybody talks, and then you get a lot of problems that could result from that. So just be clear, professional, appropriate, right? As ChatGPT we're saying too. Progressive discipline, there it is again. This protects against claims of unfair treatment, right? You saw it coming, you've been warned, however your progressive discipline looks like. Include a general outline here, verbal warning, written warning, potentially termination. There's something called a performance improvement plan that you might actually put in place. And this depends on your type of business and your level, that you're at. This still doesn't take away from the fact that you could just, say, I'm sorry, we no longer want you to work here. We can no longer support your role or whatever that may be, because you do have a right to do that. However, um, there is a structured process that you can have in place to protect yourself even more by following these steps. So, use of the company system, and I should say, I'll step back one more. Um, and then clarify that some of those steps, so when I talk about verbal warning, written warning, termination, clarify that the steps may be skipped depending on severity. So there are a lot of things that you can have a zero tolerance policy around. Usually, someone threatens another employee, or maybe it's drug and alcohol abuse, or whatever that may look like, depending on the type of work that you do. Um, Harassment, violence, these kinds of things generally fall into a zero violence or zero tolerance type thing. You're not going to give someone a verbal warning if someone threatens another employee, right? You're going to skip straight to termination. So you want to make sure that you clarify that as well. Confidentiality, technology, use of company systems, protecting the business information. Small businesses often overlook data protection. Oh my gosh, so important. You do not want someone taking all the things that you use as a company and taking them over to the next company, right? Your sales data, any systems that you utilize internally. A lot of companies are using bots now, these types of things that they're building out internally. Estimating processes is a big one that salespeople will be like, oh, well, this is how we did it over here. This is how we figured our pricing. Oh my goodness, no, you don't want that information to be leaked. So you definitely want to create a confidentiality and technology use policy. And this is a ChatGPT prompt that you can get started with that, right? Another thing is social media conduct. We hear about this periodically, right? A lot of people think I can say whatever I want to say because it's free speech. However, sometimes there are consequences involved in that, and social media becomes a thing. Also, use of technology while in the workplace or on the Wi-Fi system, or as far as if they have a company laptop or whatever it may be, it depends on what type of sensitive files that they have access to. You probably don't want them on a public Wi-Fi system, right, where someone could potentially hack in. And so these are the types of things that you're going to have in that policy. And then that employee acknowledgement. So that's that signed confirmation from the that the employee received and understands those policies. The signature page protects you in disputes. So draft a simple acknowledgement confirming receipt, understanding, and agreement to follow the policies. Now, that understanding agreement can be a little sticky situation. A lot of them will just say, confirming that I've received it, right? Because especially if you've only given it to them today and they haven't even had time to review it, they're obviously not going to say they understand and agree. You might have some kind of follow-up meeting with them if you have a 90-day probationary period, right? You might follow up with them at 30 days and ask if they have any remaining questions that they didn't understand about the handbook, and you might have them sign off at that time that they had no remaining questions, right? So scenario one, this is a question. You ask your niece to help in your boutique every Monday, Wednesday, Saturday for 4 hours. She follows your opening closing routine, uses your register, wears your store apron. You pay her $50 cash at the end of the week. Is she an employee or a contractor? fun on this end because I can see all of your initials and then um, they pop up when you guys answer it. So yes, she really technically is an employee. And what they did wrong is they paid her cash, right? So they're technically paying her money. Now, whether you pay someone cash or you pay someone a check, is both okay, right? But there has to be documentation about how you paid them, right? And if she's an employee, there would have been taxes withheld from that. So there still has to be that paper trail from that standpoint. So just handing someone 50 bucks cash, that's wrong at the end of the week. So you guys got that right. She is supposed to be an employee. Doesn't matter if she's a family member, right? She should have had the new hire reporting done, all those fun things. So yes, she is an employee. You're controlling her schedule and the tools. You're paying her cash, not withholding taxes. Failing to report her is a violation. So scenario two. You hire a freelance graphic designer to create your logo. You provide your ideas, but let her decide the design. She works from her home office, uses her own software, charges you a flat $300 project fee. Contractor or employee? Yes, she is a contractor. She meets the behavioral and financial independence standards. Remember, we had three standards that we're looking for, and she meets all of those. Scenario three, you verbally offer someone a job helping with deliveries. They start next week. You don't give them anything in writing. They work 2 weeks, then they quit. You didn't file any forms or report them as a new hire. What is the employer missing? This could be a long answer, by the way. Everything. Yes. Everything. They skipped all the things. So this is another one of those reasons that you want to make sure that you have that packet, right? And when I talk about onboarding, and that you have them fill this out before they ever start working. Not, hey, bring that to me when you got a chance or get that. So there's a lot of employees, I've had it happen to me before, even the ones that filled out paperwork, they start working and they walk off the job or they're gone, especially in the type of work that we did, right? With the landscaping or snow removal. Those that can be brutal, maybe on the first day, especially with what the weather's been like lately. But they may stay for 2 weeks, they may stay for 5 minutes, they may be here forever. Just follow a consistent process. So all the legal steps, no written offer. You don't always have to have a written offer. I didn't really mention that. It's good to have it just to make it clear. No W-4, WH-4, no I-9, no hire reporting. This creates a major risk and possible fines. Some employers, how they will do this is they'll be like, we're holding your paycheck, right? You need to come pick it up. You have to have them fill out the forms then. That's pretty awkward. But you still need to have them fill out the forms. Anyway, you can get them. You still have to pay them. You can't not pay them because they did work for you. So it is a touchy simple situation. Templates and take home tools for you. So lots of resources. I'm not going to go through all of these individually. I did have them in the slides that are out there for you that you can utilize. Indiana Department. I shared some of these earlier as well, but you can look at those slides and see a lot of those resources out there. A starting HR toolkit, so templates that you can use right away. There's a couple links down here where you can look up some of these, how to generate an offer letter, right? Employee handbook templates, contractor versus employee checklist to help you with that classification. But ultimately, if you need additional help with HR, please reach out to the Indiana Small Business Development Center near you, or if you're already working with them, ask for that extra help. They are here to help you, and HR specifically, right? So you need help setting up that employee handbook or that toolbox, or getting assistance with how do you register for all these filings, or how do you set up payroll, those kinds of things. Definitely speak with them and get the help you need. Any questions that you guys have remaining? That is the end of what I'm talking about tonight. So we've got a couple minutes that you guys can ask questions. Otherwise, you can jump off of here. The recording, as I mentioned, is going to be with the Indiana Small Business Development Center. We'll also post it in a few days, probably on our YouTube at SBC First is the YouTube channel, with most of the other that we do. Yes, Nate, I can reshare the slides if you guys couldn't access them. Let me see if they will upload. All right, they're on the way. Hopefully they make it. It says it went through. So everybody should be able to see them.
I have a question, Christy.
Yeah,
So, I the really I manage a nonprofit, a small nonprofit that's been around for a while, but
okay,
I'm new to the role.
okay.
So I'm just trying to get us up to uh, a compliant place.
Yes,
And so, we have plumbers in like every other week. We have, some guy paving. We have the AC guy. All of those contractors, if it's over 600, they all need what is it, the 1099s and
yeah.
okay, okay, okay,
So every one of those, when you hire them, I would just have them fill out a W-9. So that's where independent contractors gets a little
yeah,
confusing, right? Is that they're not necessarily performing work on your behalf that you're being paid for. So they also could just be doing something for you like that. Those
yeah,
what are more notably contractors like plumbers and electricians and whatever. However, where they wouldn't get one is if they're a corporation. So depending on the size of company, right? So it's often the smaller ones that you would end up. But you can and ask them to fill it out right, and they may tell you right then, like, no, we're a corporation, fill those out, or they will.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Sure. Good job for getting compliant though, at
Oh
some
yeah,
point,
well,
right?
the
It is a
process.
process. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is definitely easier to do it in the beginning, even though it seems like a lot of steps than when you're already into it. And especially if a state organization or even employee, right, says you're not doing this right, that's not where you want to be.
No, no. I know I'm a hiring soon, and I was just hired relatively recently myself, and I'm just like, I don't think any of that was done. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what? I've worked in a lot of small businesses throughout my career that part of the reason that I was there was to do exactly these type things. And not just from an HR standpoint, right? For everything within the company. They didn't have any processes, but
Mhm.
we all start small businesses and we know how to do the thing that we started the business for, but we don't necessarily know how to do the business aspect of it. So
Yeah.
we get there.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been really helpful.
Sure. Good. I'm
I'm
glad.
gonna jump away.
All right. Any other questions anybody has before we sign off? Feel free to unmute, just like Rachel did. You can drop it in the chat if you're somewhere where you can't talk. All right. It doesn't look like anybody else has any other questions. So thank you all for well, nope, here we go. Here's another one. Thank you all for joining though. Oh, you're welcome, Missy. She was just saying thank you. And I will talk to you guys again soon at the next training. So have a great evening. Bye bye.